Imagine the heartbreak of an entire family wiped out in an instant, traveling to check on their home amid the chaos of war. That's the devastating reality unfolding in Gaza, where 11 lives were lost in a single tragic incident. And this is just the latest flashpoint in an already volatile ceasefire. But here's where it gets controversial. Was this a justified military action or an unjustifiable tragedy? Let's dive into the details and see what most people are missing about the complexities on the ground. According to Gaza's civil defense, which is overseen by Hamas, the victims, all members of the Abu Shaaban family, were aboard a bus en route to inspect their home in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City late Friday night. An Israeli tank shell struck the vehicle, claiming the lives of 11 people, including women and children. This marks the most lethal single event involving Israeli forces in Gaza since the ceasefire kicked off 8 days ago, underscoring how fragile peace can feel in a region steeped in conflict. For beginners trying to grasp this, a ceasefire is essentially a temporary halt in fighting, brokered through negotiations to allow for things like prisoner and hostage exchanges. In this case, the first phase of the agreement lets Israeli troops remain active in over half of the Gaza Strip, patrolling areas they still control. Think of it like a divided territory where invisible lines dictate safe zones. But as we'll see, those lines can be as confusing as they are contentious. From Israel's perspective, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, describe the situation differently. They claim their soldiers spotted a suspicious vehicle breaching what they call the yellow line, an unmarked boundary separating Israeli-occupied zones from the rest of Gaza. In response, they fired warning shots, but the bus kept advancing, posing what they deemed an immediate danger. Following the rules of the ceasefire, troops then opened fire to neutralize the threat. It's a stark contrast to the civilian account, highlighting how perceptions of suspicion can vary wildly in a war zone. Hamas, unsurprisingly, paints a different picture, accusing Israel of targeting the family without any valid reason. They were simply trying to reach their property, say spokespeople like Mahmoud Basal from the Civil Defense, who spoke to AFP. This clash of narratives begs the question, what constitutes a threat in such a fluid battlefield? And this is the part most people miss. Many Palestinians with patchy internet and no physical markers for these lines might unknowingly wander into restricted areas, turning everyday errands into life-or-death gambles. Adding to the complexity, the IDF has issued warnings against entering their controlled zones, but with limited access to information, it's a recipe for misunderstandings. The BBC reached out to the IDF for precise coordinates of the incident to verify claims, and in a promising move, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant announced plans to install visible signs along the demarcation line for clearer guidance. It's a small step toward transparency, but critics might argue it's too little, too late in a conflict where trust is in short supply. Meanwhile, the ceasefire is also facilitating humanitarian exchanges, though not without its own disputes. On Friday, Hamas handed over the remains of Israeli hostage Eliyahu Margalit to the Red Cross for repatriation to Israel, marking the 10th deceased hostage returned. Yet 18 more bodies are still awaiting release, fueling outrage in Israel. Hamas says it's not a breach of the deal. The U.S. has downplayed it as such, but Israel insists on full compliance. Hamas counters that Israeli airstrikes have turned much of Gaza into rubble, making it hard to locate remains without access to heavy equipment like excavators, which Israel prohibits from entering. To put this in perspective for those new to the story, the broader context stems from Hamas's October 7, 2023, attack on southern Israel, which killed around 1,200 people and led to 251 hostages. Israel's military response has resulted in at least 67,900 deaths in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, a source the UN deems credible. As part of the ceasefire, Israel released 250 Palestinian prisoners from its jails and 1,718 detainees from Gaza, while Hamas returned all 20 living hostages. But here's where it gets really controversial. Is the ceasefire holding? Or is it just a pause before more violence? Some argue that incidents like this bus strike expose cracks in the agreement, potentially risking a full resumption of hostilities. Others might see Israel's military actions as necessary precautions in a hostile environment, while critics accuse them of disproportionate force against civilians. And what about the yellow line? Is it a fair boundary or an arbitrary divider that endangers innocence? This is the kind of debate that divides opinions sharply. What do you think? Do you side with Israel's version of a defensive strike, or does Hamas's account of an unprovoked attack resonate more with you? Is the ceasefire more fragile than we realize, and could small misunderstandings like this one spark a bigger conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with the IDF's rationale, or do you see it as another example of civilian casualties in an ongoing tragedy? Let's discuss and unpack this together.